Hey, and we're back here at the broadcast booth at the USCCA Expo, and I have the distinct pleasure of being surrounded by two pretty cool dudes. We got Rob Beckman, who is actually our official interview guest, I guess, for this segment, and Matthew Marister joining us for his first segment here live at the show. And Matthew now is the producer of the Concealed Carry podcast. He's an instructor in the concealedcarry.com instructor network in the Columbus area. And then we've got on the other side, the other Ohio guy, Rob Beckman, instructing. You teach in Cincinnati a little bit, right? But you're also
in the Cincinnati area, but we're technically teaching Indiana, which is like 100 feet over the state line.
100 feet over the state line, that's right. Yeah, so anyway, I'm feeling, like Buckeye proud or something, So, guys, I wanted to give you a little preview. Coming up here, the rest of the schedule for the rest of today, we've got John Correa. He's going to be on with me and Matthew at 5:30 Eastern time. So we'll look forward to picking John's brains. He's well known as the dude that does active self-protection and all the deadly force videos and analysis that he's well known for. We got Joe Khalil coming up at 6 p.m. Eastern. We got wrapping up the day will be Scott Wagner at 6:30. So just wanted to give you a little preview on the upcoming schedule. And then we got a full schedule, like literally full. There's not a single opening tomorrow at all. And so we'll look forward to seeing you all back here again tomorrow. Coverage starts at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So that'll be really great. So it's my pleasure, like I said, an honor to have Rob here. Rob, you are the owner of American Defense Training.
Correct.
Yep. And so give us just a quick rundown of your background as an instructor, whatever it is that you typically would share for a bio, so folks have a kind of a sense of who you are and what you do.
I run American Defense Training in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is in the southwest corner. We cover the southeast part of Indiana as well as northern Kentucky. We specialize in doing NRA training as well as United States Concealed Carry training. I'm a training counselor in both, so I not only teach the student classes, but also go along and teach the instructor classes too. And the one thing that I like to go along and pass along to my students is, especially the instructors, is to understand the people that we're training are the people that are going to be sitting next to you in church. People are going to be sitting next to you or standing in the Walmart checkout line, those types of things. And you want to instill in them the best possible knowledge because you don't want to worry about them if they're standing behind your family or standing behind you thinking, okay, does this person know what they're doing? You want to have that confidence saying they know what they're doing and I don't have to worry about, them accidentally shooting me and things like that. The other thing I get into a lot on is the psychology of shooting. When you start talking about tunnel vision, when you start talking about auditory exclusion, all those different factors that come in when you're actually trying to go along and in a high stress situation, which shootings would be a high stress of understanding what's going to happen. It's not a matter of not having those kind of physiology reactions, but it's actually going along and learning how to deal with them. What's the difference between a civilian versus SEAL Team 6 when it comes to handling that? It's that they've trained and learned how to deal with those physiology changes, the adrenaline, the tunnel vision, all those types of things in a more productive manner. And that's where, when I put people through training, try to go along and make sure they get some stress behind them and understand that, hey, you just went along, shot a perfect bullseye, but you saw nothing else going on around you. That could mean that somebody could walk up behind you, walk up from the side of you. It could mean that your wife is walking up and all of a sudden you didn't realize that she's behind you. It's not just bad guys. It's trying to be aware of everything that's around you because, you add auditory exclusion into it, and what happens? All of a sudden, you can't even hear the kids screaming because you're so focused on the target. But they're trying to scream and tell you something else is happening, and that's where we go through a lot of exercises and making sure people learn how to break those kind of the physiology effects and be more aware of looking around and seeing what's happening in their surroundings.
Yeah, that's a really great point because, just a little bit ago I was on the demo stage here at the show talking about muscle memory mistakes, and one of the things I was talking about was, doing the scan, like post engagement scan, and how I think a muscle memory mistake is doing that, without purpose, to where you see some shooters, they do their shooting, and as soon as they're done, they're okay, and it should be done with purpose. You should be, trying to process information, looking for details, understanding what, is going on in your surroundings. And I love the point that you brought up, that it's not just scanning for additional threats, but scanning for the good guys as well. And like your wife coming up alongside you or behind you, and you are so focused. You just shot this dude, tunnel vision focused, and all of a sudden, and she grabs you, and you don't know, you're hyped up. So that's a really great point.
One of the things I do to really kind of drive that home is I'll go along and pick something out that's behind them.
Yeah.
You ask them which window on the car is down. Ask them what color something is. A chair that we set out on the range. Just ask them something. Very benign, but what that forces them to do after you do it a couple times is they now have to start scanning, and they're not just looking, okay, I've looked. It's like I'm looking, I'm counting the number of chairs that are there. I'm going along and seeing what people are doing, which is what you need to do to process things properly.
Yeah.
And you go along like, okay, I'm good. Now I can go along and, change what I'm doing. I check on the family, do those, but I've processed the area around me. I'm not going to have a surprise.
Yeah. I do the same thing. So that's a really great drill. That's a great tip that you just provided our viewers. Matthew, you were a cop, so you I think you understand a thing or two about this kind of concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you one question when you were talking about when you teach your students and you put them through this drill where you ask them a color or something like that. Do you find that initially their mind's blown, like, I had no idea what color that was, or I didn't even realize that I should be looking around. And then after you start doing this drill, they start picking up on that, and it kind of clicks for them, and they start realizing now why they're doing that, rather than, okay, I saw this on TV, I should look around, but now I actually realize why, and it starts to make sense to them.
It's one of the things, and we've talked about before, I've been on the podcast, we train our muscles to be able to shoot, and shoot effectively. But we also have to take the next step of training our minds so we can go along and actively be able to, make judgment calls and things like that. We're going to be amped up more than we've ever been amped up before. But if we've
the cognitive aspect.
Here. Yeah, and if we go along, we can actually go along, okay, what's that person wearing, where are their hands at, what's going on in that car, and start slicing the picture up. All of a sudden, people start learning to look more than what's around. And normally what happens when we're teaching classes, we're telling people to look, and you'll get that little shoulder look over, and it's like, okay, who saw how many fingers I was holding up? And they're like, I didn't see that. Okay, now I got to turn even more. And then you go along, and I get my hands folded, and they're like, your hands are folded. It's like, no, I was going to ask you where the chair was. And they're like, forgot that. It's like, don't think of what don't expect something. Figure out what's there and process it for what's there.
Yeah.
Because again, we're trying to train the psychological part for them, so they've got the shooting down. Most of the people that come to these advanced classes can't shoot. That's why they're there. But they want to be pushed a little bit further to train their psychological side of it, so they can be more effective if they do come to that deadly force encounter.
Yeah, it really is. It really is a different aspect of shooting, particularly with the self-defense context in mind. Not just the shooting capability or skills, but also that cognitive aspect. Now, my good buddy Mark Pasamanik really introduced to me the idea of the cognitive stack, and the way he describes it. When we had him on the podcast to talk about that a number of episodes ago, and the way he describes that is, the average human can process maybe 3 or 4 things at a time, right, cognitively. Okay, and that's even a little bit of an ask, because think about it. And a great example is driving. Okay, so you're driving, You're thinking about what's in front of you. You're checking your mirrors periodically. You're thinking about, okay, apply, gas, use the brake, turn on the signal, whatever. And then you start throwing into the mix using the cell phone, touching the radio, dealing with a crying baby in the back or something. And now you're overloading that cognitive stack, and something has to force its way out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, how many times do you my favorite drills are the shooting drills that require you to think.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That like really test you as far as processing information, and how often when you're setting somebody up, you're giving them a stressful drill to shoot, and you want them to do something or execute something, and they completely forget. I mean, you hold up, hey, how many fingers am I holding up? And I didn't even see that.
Or not just that they miscount how many rounds they were supposed to fire for that drill.
Yes,
they're like,
totally.
oh, I thought you said four rounds, and you're like, no, that was the drill before. This drill you're shooting 2 rounds, and they're like, oh, I totally forgot how many. And it's a simple thing, but they're overloading themselves.
Yep.
But if you think about it, how can you increase the ability or your mind's ability to handle more things is by exposure, right? Like you use the analogy to the car. Anybody who's new to driving, they're overwhelmed, right? Like
they're thinking about every little thing.
Right. But once you've done it a long time and certain things become natural, now you can turn the radio on. And
you can prioritize.
You can do that and still drive and still look at the upcoming sign where you're going to exit, right? But at first, you got to turn down the radio so you can read that sign. You got to, everything has to be just right because you get overwhelmed easier. So the more you can expose these people to more cognitive aspects of shooting rather than just the mechanical part, it helps.
It's sort of it's kind of like stress inoculation.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a way, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the command targets? Where you've got the 1 through 6 and then different shapes, different colors?
Yeah, I love those targets.
We go along and we not only have people shoot the colors and the numbers, but then we start doing math with them.
Yep.
We start going along and saying 10.
Yep.
And they go along the first time, they're like, there's no 10. It's like, well, you've got to figure out how to make 10.
Yep,
is it
exactly.
4 and 6, 2 5s, a 3 and a 7? Or is it how do you make it up?
I love that example because you're giving them a math problem that they have to solve their own way. That's way harder than saying 2 plus 4 and look for the 6.
Well, and it's very similar to any kind of deadly force encounter. Do you stand and fight? Do you exit? Do you go behind this cover? Do you seek this kind of concealment? At what point do you go along draw versus going along and comply? And that's where you're trying to get the mind to go along and not freeze up, but actually go along and keep processing. And that's where a lot of people come out of, we'll shoot for 4 or 5 hours, and they'll be like, I'm just exhausted. It's like, yeah, because we're taking the mind and we're working through all these cycles and not just sitting there pulling triggers and hitting bullseyes all the time. We're trying to go along and say, okay, do this and go along watch on the command target. We'll actually go along and tell them, shoot it as many times as it takes to hit the target. Yep. And that's where they realize, too, it's not just a boom, boom. It's a boom, do I have a hit or not? And really get people to focus on making sure they're accurate because accuracy is going to count. The first person to hit the target accurately is probably going to be the person who's going to win, without a doubt.
Well, that's why shooting and assessing is so critical, right? Because which you have to do in a real life encounter because you don't just shoot blindly. You got to shoot and then assess. Do I keep shooting or not? So yeah, what you're touching on there is fantastic. I want to explore this idea just a little bit further, the idea of sort of inoculating a shooter to be able to handle, more stress or more inputs. And so we've given some examples of maybe some of the different drills or things that are done, but how do you really dig deep on this and with your more advanced students?
Well, one of the things that I make sure of is that we don't overload them too far because failure can be a really bad thing to go along and think that, okay, I just can't do it. So I start very slow, and then as we start amping it up, when you think about it, we do it in the advanced classes, we start very basic in doing the command targets. Then we start going along and introducing to scan the area, and then we also go along and start adding movement into it. So many times when we're in a basic concealed carry class, we're always shooting at a basic target. We're very square with it. We do what we have set up as a barrel drill, and we actually go along and walk a figure 8 between the barrels. And what that really allows me to do, and I like teaching the instructors this because it gives them a little bit of knowledge what's going on behind the scenes. No matter what skill level the shooter is, you can go along and challenge them in that drill.
Yep.
If you got somebody who's very sharp, very quick on a draw, you can go along, put them to where they're 2 feet away from the target, to where they've got to make a very quick shot. At the same time, you can go along and make them make a 30-foot shot, which is a very long distance, but they've got to go along, seek cover, concealment, look around and see what else is going on, and really drive home the point that they've got to process the entire area. And depending upon how they're doing, and again, I'm sitting there counting the shots on my hand, I can go along and say, okay, I'm gonna go along and call last shot between 2 barrels, so they get slide locked. All of a sudden, slide lock, and I've got to do something about it. And I can't do it standing on my 2 feet, so I've got to seek cover someplace. At the same time, I'm dropping magazines, same time I'm putting a new magazine into it, and getting people to start thinking about it because, again, we're exercising the mind to say, I'm just not shooting holes in a target. I'm actually saying, what would I do if this happened? And if I'm in a deadly force encounter, okay, slide lock, I'm going to seek cover. I'm getting out of the line of fire. Yeah. And that's where we keep amping it up, doing several different drills, multiple times, so they see, okay, here's the challenge, I'm moving, here's the challenge of going along and identifying targets, and then trying to, okay, are you hitting the target? If you're hitting the target, you're good. If you're all over the place, take a little bit more time, because again, accuracy is going to win the fight.
Awesome. Wow, there's a lot of great thoughts there. Matthew, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on this aspect because I know we kind of harp on this on the show quite a bit as far as seeking out additional training or going out and getting good training. But what does it mean? You know what I mean? Like, everybody throws that out and says, hey, make sure you go get good training. And then somebody's at home and they're like, well, what is good training? How do I know I'm getting good training, right? And so I think it's good that we talk about your methodology of training or instructor's methodology, because it's important to understand that anybody can look on YouTube and run you through a drill. You can get a drill off of YouTube and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and run it. Mm-hmm. But it takes an instructor who understands why you do the drill and how to challenge the person in the right way. Like you said, that you don't want to set up this person for failure right off the bat. You do want them to have to push themselves and overcome failure, but you don't want them to fail too soon, right?
Right. Well, you've got in a class, you're going to have students of varying skill levels. Masters to beginning masters, probably not beginners to masters, but you're going to go along and have people that are going to have varying skill levels. One that can draw really good from a holster, and other ones that trip over their own 2 feet. And that's where coaching them through, allowing them to be successful and allowing them to grow and understand how to properly handle the stress.
But it takes a tuned in instructor who knows what they're doing to see the difference between and challenge the ones that are up here and the ones down here, but challenge them differently. So the ones that are down here don't give up and say, I'll never be there, and the ones that are up here aren't not being challenged enough and not getting anything out of it. So I think that you hit on something really important about not just going out and getting training, but getting training from people that understand why they're doing what they're doing.
And one thing I'll add to that, and I'll just from a personal standpoint, I try to go and get training from different people every year. Yeah. I always, when I look at a course, I just don't look at a course as saying, okay, I'm going to shoot 1,000 rounds. What am I going to learn during that time? And can I check off a box saying, okay, yeah, I want to practice more on my moving and shooting? Am I going to be shooting in and around a vehicle? Do I want to go along and do nighttime shooting? Different things that allow me to grow, allow me to go along and work on those areas, because I've got ideas. I train people, but I've got areas I need to be working on also. Both shooting as well as just making myself ready to be able to do it and instruct better.
Wow. Excellent thoughts here today in this discussion with Rob Beckman and Matthew Marister, and so appreciate you guys joining me for this segment.